I want to begin, my dear, with the knock at the door because it is the sound I have heard 1,000 times since in my dreams. It was a grey Thursday in November, just gone 4 o'clock, and the light was already failing the way it does in the north at that time of year. I was sitting by the window with a cup of tea going cold in my hands, and there was a knock, 3 soft knocks, hesitant, the knock of someone who isn't sure of their welcome. And when I opened the door, there she stood. My daughter, my Grace. 11 years older than the last time I'd seen her, with grey in her hair now that hadn't been there before, and her eyes full of tears, and she said, "Mum, I'm so sorry. I've come home." And I had to stand there in my own doorway, my dear, and find a way to tell her that she was one day too late. But to understand what those words meant, and why they will haunt me until my own last breath, you must let me take you back to the beginning, to a foolish, foolish argument in a kitchen 11 years before. My name is Edith, and I am 80 years old, and I live alone now in a small stone house on the edge of Harrogate in Yorkshire, where the wind comes off the moors and rattles the windows on winter nights. I have lived in this house for 54 years. I came here as a young bride with my husband, Frank, and we raised our only child here, our daughter Grace, in these very rooms. Frank was a joiner by trade, a big, quiet, gentle man with hands like shovels and a heart to match, and he worshipped the ground that girl walked on. A daughter and her father, my dear, there is a particular kind of love there, isn't there, that a mother only ever watches from the side and is glad to. Grace was the centre of Frank's whole world, and he was the centre of hers, and for the first 25 years of her life there was not a cigarette paper's width between them. Which is why what happened hurt him most of all, and which is why I have never quite forgiven myself for my part in it. Let me give you just one picture of them so you understand what was lost. When Grace was small, perhaps 7 or 8, Frank built her a swing in the big ash tree at the bottom of the garden. Built it himself, of course, sanded the seat till it was smooth as glass so she'd never get a splinter. And he'd push her on it for hours on a summer evening, the two of them laughing, her shouting higher, Daddy, higher, and him pretending to push her clean over the top. And when she was a teenager and her heart got broken for the first time by some daft boy, it was not me she went to, my dear, it was Frank out in his workshop. And he sat her on the bench amongst the wood shavings, and he didn't say a clever word, he just let her cry. And then he made her a cup of tea so strong you could stand a spoon up in it, and somehow that mended her. That was the bond. 25 years of that, and I broke it in an afternoon with a sharp tongue and a frightened heart. The argument. I must tell you about the argument, though even now, after all these years, I am ashamed of how small it was. How unworthy of the price we all paid for it. Grace, at 25, fell in love with a man. His name was Daniel, and he was, well, he was not what Frank and I had hoped for, my dear, and I'll be honest with you about that, because honesty is the only thing I have left to offer this story. He was older than her, divorced, with a way about him that I didn't trust, and he was taking her away, not just emotionally but physically, away down south to London, away from us, away from the life we'd imagined for her. And I, God forgive me, I did not hold my tongue. I should have held my tongue. A wiser woman, an older woman, the woman I am now, would have held her tongue. But I was younger then, and frightened of losing my girl, and fear makes fools of us all. We had words, Grace and I, in this kitchen, on a Sunday afternoon with the roast going cold on the table. Terrible words. I said things about Daniel that a mother should never say about the man her daughter loves. I called him a chancer. I said he was using her. I said she was throwing her life away and that she'd come running back to us when it all fell apart. And Grace, who had her father's quiet strength and her mother's sharp tongue both at once, looked at me across that table, and she said very calmly, which was worse than shouting, "If you can't be happy for me, Mum, then I don't want you in my life." And I mean it. And Frank, my poor Frank, sat between us not knowing which way to turn, loving us both, and he said, now, let's all calm down, the way men do, and neither of us calmed down. And Grace got up from the table and she walked out of this house, and my dear, she did not come back for 11 years. I didn't believe it at first. I thought she'd cool off. I thought a week, a month at most, and the phone would ring. But the times were changing, and Daniel took her to London, and they married without us there, and the weeks became months, and the months became years, and the silence set in like frost, and it would not thaw. I telephoned in the early days. The number changed. I wrote, and the early letters came back, and then they stopped coming back, but no reply ever came either, which was somehow worse, because I never knew if she was reading them or burning them or never even seeing them at all. We heard things occasionally, through a cousin who'd stayed in touch with her, that she was well, that the marriage to Daniel had, in fact, ended after a few years, which I never once said I told you so about, not even to Frank, because by then being right had stopped mattering to me entirely, that she'd settled in a different town, that she had a child, a daughter of her own, my granddaughter, a little girl I had never met and was not permitted to meet. That news, my dear, the news that I had a granddaughter growing up who didn't know my face, was the cruelest of all. I want you to understand what those years of silence were actually like, my dear, because from the outside an estrangement looks like nothing at all. It looks like an empty chair, a name that stops being mentioned. But from the inside it is 1,000 small woundings, one a day every day. It was setting the table for two on a Sunday and remembering halfway through that there would never be a third place again. It was the Christmas cards that came addressed only to Mr. and Mrs. Now, never and family. It was hearing a young woman laugh in the supermarket with exactly Grace's laugh and having to put my basket down and go and sit in the car. It was Frank coming in from the shed where he'd been oiling that bicycle again, and neither of us saying a word about it because there were no words left that didn't hurt. People imagine you get used to it. You do not get used to it, my dear. You simply learn to carry it, the way you'd learn to walk with a stone in your shoe if someone told you it could never be taken out. 11 years with a stone in my shoe. Now I must tell you about the biscuit tin because the tin is the heart of this story. After the first year of silence, I made myself a promise. I decided that no matter what, no matter how long it took, Grace would never be able to say that her mother forgot her. And so every year on her birthday, the 7th of June, I sat down at this kitchen table and I wrote my daughter a letter. Not an angry letter. Not a letter asking why or demanding her return or raking over the argument. Just a letter telling her about the year, what the garden had done, how her father was, the funny thing the cat did, the small ordinary news of a small ordinary life, the news I'd have told her over the phone if she'd only have let me. I wrote it as though we'd never quarrelled at all, and then I put a stamp on it, and I addressed it to the last address the cousin had given me, and I did not send it. Because I was afraid, my dear. Afraid that if I sent it and it came back, or worse, if I sent it and heard nothing, the last small hope I had would die. So instead I put each letter in an old blue biscuit tin, the one with the picture of the seaside on the lid, and I closed the lid and I waited. 11 letters, my dear. 11 birthdays. 11 years of news she never heard. Frank knew about the tin. He never wrote himself. He couldn't, my dear. It broke him in a way he didn't have words for, that great quiet man, to have lost his girl. But sometimes on the 7th of June, he would come and stand behind my chair while I wrote, with his big hand on my shoulder, and he'd read over what I'd written. And once, only once, he said, tell her her dad still keeps her bike in the shed, in case she ever wants it. And I wrote it down. He'd kept her childhood bicycle, you see, oiled and ready for 11 years, in case his girl ever came home and wanted to go for a ride. He never gave up on her, not for one single day. He just couldn't find the words, and so he kept a bicycle instead, which was Frank's way of writing a letter. And then, my dear, 2 years ago, Frank began to fail. It was his heart. The doctors were kind, but they were honest, and they told us that the time he had left was to be measured in months, not years. And I watched my husband receive that news, and I watched the thought that crossed his face, the same thought that was crossing mine, the thought neither of us spoke for a long while. Grace. He was going to die without seeing Grace. The bicycle was going to stay in the shed. In those last months, I begged him to let me try harder to reach her. I wanted to telephone every Susan, and every cousin, and every old friend, until I found a number that worked. I wanted to get in the car and drive to the last town we'd heard she lived in and knock on every door. But Frank, and this is the part I have wrestled with ever since, Frank wouldn't have it. No, Edith, he said, lying there so thin and grey in the bed we'd shared for 50 years. I'll not have her come back out of guilt. I'll not have her last memory of her did be a deathbed she was summoned to. If she comes home, I want it to be because she wanted to, not because we frightened her into it. Let her keep the dad she remembers, the big strong one. Pride, my dear. His pride and her pride, the same stubborn Yorkshire pride, the pride that had cost us 11 years and it would not let go even at the end. And I, fool that I was, I honoured his wish. I have asked myself 10,000 times whether I was right to. I still don't know. In those last weeks, when he could no longer get down to the shed himself, Frank asked me to bring the bicycle up to the house. I thought it a strange request, but I wheeled it up the path and stood it in the hall where he could see it from his chair, and he looked at it for a long time, and then he said something I have never forgotten. You know, Edith, he said, I don't keep it because I think she's coming. I gave that up a while ago, if I'm honest. I keep it because keeping it is the only way I've got left to love her. A man's got to put his love somewhere, and if he can't put it in his daughter, he'll put it in her bicycle. And I had to leave the room, my dear, because I could not let him see my face. That great quiet man, putting 40 years of a father's love into the oiling of a chain, because there was nowhere else to put it. I have thought since that this is what most people never understand about the ones who seem cold, or who never reach out, they are not loving less. They are loving a bicycle in a shed, because they have lost the courage to love the person, and they cannot bear to stop loving altogether. Frank passed away on a Wednesday in the early hours with my hand in his. His last words, my dear, I'll share them with you, though they are precious to me. His last words were not about death or pain or fear. He turned to me and he said, "Has the phone gone?" Because even then, even at the very end, some part of that good man was still listening for the phone to ring, still waiting for his girl to come home. And it hadn't gone, and he closed his eyes, and he was gone. I sat with him a long while in the dark. And then, as the grey light came up, I went downstairs and I took the blue biscuit tin down from the shelf and I held it in my lap. 11 letters my daughter had never read, and I wept as I have never wept in my life. Not just for Frank. For all of it. For the foolish argument and the wasted years and the granddaughter I'd never met and the bicycle in the shed and the phone that never rang. The funeral was the following Thursday. And here, my dear, is where the cruelty of it all comes to its sharpest point, and I can barely tell it even now. I did at last manage to get word to Grace. After Frank was gone, his wish no longer bound me, and I telephoned the cousin and I said, "You must find her. You must tell her. Her father has died, and she has the right to know and to come to the funeral if she wishes," and the cousin did find her. And Grace, my Grace, got in her car the moment she heard, and she drove north through the night, 4 hours through the dark and the November rain to come home at last. But she got the days muddled in her grief and her panic. She thought the funeral was the Friday. It was the Thursday, and so she arrived, my dear, on that grey Thursday afternoon, knocking 3 soft, hesitant knocks at the door of her childhood home, at the very hour, almost to the minute, that her father was being lowered into the ground in the churchyard 2 miles away. She had driven through the night to come home to her dad, and she had missed him, by a single day, by less than a single day. That is what I had to tell her, standing in the doorway. That is the thing no mother should ever have to say to her child. She stood there saying, "Mum, I'm so sorry I've come home. Where's Dad? I have to see Dad. I have to tell him." And I had to take both her hands in mine, my dear, and I had to say, "Grace, love, your dad died last week. We buried him this morning. You've just missed him. Oh, my love, you've just missed him." I will not describe to you the sound my daughter made. Some sounds are too private even for a story. I will only tell you that we stood in that doorway and held each other, the two of us in the cold November dusk, and 11 years of silence broke apart all at once and washed away. And what was left underneath it was just a mother and her daughter, and a grief so large it had no bottom to it. We went inside. We sat at the old kitchen table, the very table where it had all begun. And I made tea because that is what we do, and after a long while, when she could speak, Grace told me everything. How the marriage to Daniel had been every bit the mistake I'd feared, but how her pride wouldn't let her come home and admit it. How she'd thought about us every day. How she'd picked up the phone 100 times and put it down again. How she told her own daughter, my granddaughter, a girl of 9 now, called Frances, after her grandfather Frank, my dear, which set me weeping all over again, that she had a nana and a granddad in Yorkshire, and that one day they'd all go and visit when the time was right. When the time was right. Oh, my dear. There is no phrase in the English language that has stolen more from more families than when the time is right. The time is never right. The time is only ever now. And then it is gone, and then I gave her the tin. I fetched it down from the shelf, the blue tin with the seaside on the lid, and I put it in her hands, and I said, "These are for you. One for every birthday. I never sent them because I was a coward, but I never forgot you, not for one single year, and your father never forgot you either." And Grace opened the tin, and she took out the letters, 11 of them in their stamped and addressed envelopes, and she began to read them, there at the kitchen table, in order from the first year to the last. And I watched my daughter read 11 years of the love she'd been too proud to come home for, and I watched her find, in the 7th letter, the line her father had asked me to write: "Your dad still keeps your bike in the shed, in case you ever want it." And she put the letter down, and she got up from the table without a word, and she walked out to the shed in the dark and the rain, and she found her childhood bicycle, oiled and ready, where her father had kept it for 11 years, waiting for her, and she sat down on the cold floor of that shed next to it, my dear, and she cried for her father in the place where he'd kept his hope for her alive. I let her be. Some grief needs to be alone with the thing it grieves. Now, my dear, I will not pretend to you that this story has the happy ending you might have wished for it. Frank is gone, and he died without seeing his girl, and no amount of reconciliation afterward can mend that or give those years back. That is the plain truth, and I'll not dress it up, because the whole point of telling you this is so that it doesn't happen to you. But I will tell you what good did come, because some did, and it would be wrong to leave it out. Grace came home. Not just that Thursday, she came home for good in the end. She sold up in the south, and she and my granddaughter Frances moved back to Yorkshire, to a house not 10 minutes from mine, and I have spent these last 2 years getting to know the granddaughter I was denied for 9. Getting to know little Frances has been the great mending of my old age, my dear. She is a serious, watchful child, with Frank's slow, careful way of doing things. She'll spend an hour building something out of bricks and not say a word, exactly as her granddad would lose himself in his workshop. The first time she came to my house, she was shy of me, this strange old woman she'd only heard about in a promise that kept being put off. But I had kept something for her, you see. I had kept Frank's box of carpentry tools, the small ones, and I sat with her at the kitchen table, and I showed her his chisels and his little plane, and I told her how her granddad could turn a plank of rough wood into something smooth enough to keep a girl from ever getting a splinter. And she listened, grave as a judge, and at the end she said, "I wish I'd met him." And I said, "So do I, my love, so do I, but you've got his hands. Look," and I showed her how her fingers were shaped just like his, and she was so pleased, my dear. She went home and told her mother she had her granddad's hands, and Grace rang me that night just to cry down the telephone, because it was the first telephone call in 12 years where the crying was the good kind. Frances rides her mother's old bicycle now, the one from the shed, her granddad's bicycle in a way, and when she rings the bell on it, coming up my path on a Saturday morning, it is the sweetest sound in all the world, and it is also every single time a small knife in my heart because Frank should be here to hear it. He kept that bicycle for 11 years and he never got to see his granddaughter ride it. That is the cost, my dear. That is what pride costs in the end. It is always paid by someone, and very often it is paid by the innocent. Here is the lesson, my dear, and I want you to hear it not as a sweet story but as a warning from an old woman who got it wrong and paid for it. We tell ourselves that there will be time. We tell ourselves that the other person should apologize first, that we were in the right, that our pride is worth defending, that we will reach out when we're ready, when the dust settles, when the time is right. And all the while a clock is ticking that we cannot hear, and we do not know how many hours are left on it, and one day, one ordinary grey Thursday, the hours simply run out, and there is a knock at the door, and it is one day too late. 11 years, my dear, over an argument about a man who was gone within 5 of them. 11 Christmases. 11 birthdays I wrote about but could not send. A husband who died listening for a phone that didn't ring. All of it, all of that loss for pride. For being right. And being right, I promise you, is the coldest and emptiest thing to be left holding when the person you were right about is gone. I think often now about that word too late, and how quietly it arrives. It does not come with trumpets. There is no warning the morning of the day that turns out to be the last chance. Frank did not wake on his last Wednesday knowing it was his last Wednesday. Grace did not set off that Thursday knowing she had the day wrong. We none of us know which knock at the door is the one that comes too late. And that, my dear, is exactly why you cannot afford to gamble on having more time. You would not bet your house on a horse you'd never seen run. Yet we bet the people we love most on the assumption of years we have not been promised. It is the maddest wager in the world, and nearly all of us make it. So I am going to ask something of you, my dear, before you go. Is there a silence in your life? A son you haven't spoken to, a sister you fell out with, a mother whose number you still know by heart but cannot bring yourself to dial? A friend who said something unforgivable a long time ago that has started lately to seem just a little more forgivable than it used to? If there is, and most of us have one if we're honest, then please don't do what we did. Don't wait for them to call first. Don't wait until the time is right. Don't put the letter in the tin. Send it, make the call, knock on the door while there is still someone behind it to answer. Swallow the pride, my dear, it tastes bitter going down, but I promise you it is nothing, nothing at all compared to the taste of too late. I keep the biscuit tin still, on the mantelpiece now, next to Frank's photograph. It's empty, Grace has the letters, but I keep it where I can see it every day to remind me. And if telling you our story tonight stops even one of you from filling a tin of your own, then perhaps Frank's long, patient hope, and that bicycle in the shed will not have been entirely in vain. Go and make your call, my dear. Tonight if you can, don't wait until the time is right. The time is right now. The time is always right now. Good night and God bless, and mind how you go.